So let's talk about circles. Okay, there are different parts of a circle, and I'm trying to show you here. The first part I want to talk about is right along the center. This is any kind of line that goes straight through the center of a circle, all the way across from one end to the other is called the diameter. Okay, that's the distance between the two farthest points of a circle. Okay, and it always runs through the center. Now, you're going to want to memorize these, okay? And then we'll do flashcards in Quizlet and things like that. So you're going to want to memorize that this is a diameter. The radius goes straight from the center out to any point of the circle. It's always going to be the same. Okay, so if it's going from the center, the way a circle works is it's always equidistant, or the same distance, from the center. And then this whole outer part, like in our other shapes we call them perimeter, this is the circumference. All right, so those are the three main things you need to learn and remember. And we are going to use a couple terms. So we're going to use r to equal the radius. So when you see something that has a formula, anytime you see r, that's going to be the radius. And then we're going to use something called pi. Okay, it looks something like that. All right. And what this is, that is the relationship between this diameter and this circumference. Okay? The relationship is pi. And in this case, it's an irrational number. All right, and it starts with, let me put it over here, 3.14. Most of your stuff will be 3.14, but it keeps going on indefinitely, forever, and it never repeats. That's why it's called an irrational number. It goes on forever, the decimal point goes on forever, and it never repeats. So this is the relationship, is pi. So sometimes we'll use 3.14 to figure out what the circumference of something is, and sometimes you could just use pi. So if the diameter, for instance, is 1, okay, let's say 1 inch, okay, then the circumference is going to be 1 pi. Or, if we just abbreviated, 3.14. So, let me just draw from here to here is 1. Then this entire thing all the way around is 3.14. That's how that works. So, if, for instance, the diameter is 2, well, then it would be 2 pi. Or 2 times 3.14, which is 6.28. All right? And again, that's how we would figure this out. Now, the radius, we said, is from the center to the outside. Circumference, the outside perimeter. Well, that is basically from here to here. So that is half of the diameter. So the radius is always half of the diameter. Okay, well, that would let you know that if the diameter is, you multiply the diameter by pi in order to get the circumference. If the radius is just half of that, then the circumference could be, for instance, shown as 2 pi, 2 pi r, right? Because it's 2 times r. Okay, so, or we could write it this way, r 2r pi. You can do it that way too. But basically it's r twice, or r plus r times pi. That's how you would find the circumference. So we're going to use that to find our circumferences in the future. So circumference is 2 pi r, because remember, multiplication is commutative, so I could say it in any direction, but we're going to just use this one right here. Circumference is equal to 2 pi r. Well, there's another thing that we need to figure out. What is the area? And if we just try and like put in little squares everywhere to try and figure out the circumference, we're gonna, or the area, that gets really daunting. It's very difficult to try and figure that out. So what mathematicians came up with is a formula. Okay, so just like we've got area equals base times height for a parallelogram, we have area for a circle equals pi r squared. And pi r squared means you're multiplying pi times r times r. So for instance, let's take a radius of 1. Okay? If the radius is 1, then we would plug that number in anywhere we see r. So we could write it like this. Pi, the area equals pi times r, which is times 1, times 1. Well, what does that equal? Pi, or 3.14. That's going to be my area. Well, let's try a different one. Let's try 2. Or no, let's try 3. Let's say the radius is 3. Well, then the area would equal pi times 3 times 3. And we could do this in any way. And for most of your problems, you can just use pi. Sometimes they'll want you to record it or multiply it by 3.14. But for a lot of stuff, you could just keep it as pi. That's a little more accurate, right? Because this is an irrational number that goes on forever. So anytime you're shortening that number, you're reducing the accuracy of your result. So area can equal, well, what's 3 times 3? 9. And I always put the number first, right? And then pi. So it's 9 pi. That's the area. Pi r squared. Another way of seeing squared is like this. Pi r squared. And this little thing right here is basically just 3 times 3. So anytime you square something, you get 3 times 3. For instance, if I have an actual square, how would I find the area? It's 3 times 3, right? So that is why you would consider that squared. And if I actually had 3 squares this direction and 3 squares this direction, if you add them up, it equals 9. So that's why you can use the word square. In a little bit, we'll be using cube, which is to the power of 3, but we're not there yet. That'll be for volume. So this is basics, the basics of the radius. Okay, so your things you want to remember: circumference is 2 pi r, and area is pi r squared. Okay, so remember those when you're doing your assignments.